it just all hit me so hard. I had nothing but those negative emotions to focus on, giving myself grace for the things I didn't know. It just felt like I was clawing my way through the year. Always a lesson for us to learn through our experiences in life if we are open to looking for the lessons. You know that whole idea that every year teaches you something new? I've always loved that concept, but I find in my life, it's like there's always one big lesson that just hits a little differently in each year. And for me, 2024 has brought up a lot of realizations that have completely shifted the way that I view things with my goals, my relationships, and how I handle setbacks. And I just felt really called to share it. So if there is anything that you take away from this video, hopefully it is this one lesson, and it might just change how you approach the new year ahead. And this is a pretty vulnerable chat that I'm about to have. I don't know if I'm even ready to put this out on the internet, but I do think that by sharing these types of things and these experiences, it might help someone else who might go through one of the hardest years they've ever had. And if I can just help one person, get to the end of the year feeling the way that I feel right now, then my job here is done. I think there's so much power in just sharing our life lessons. So hopefully someone else doesn't have to learn the hard way like I do often. I just got back from visiting my family in the States, and I was so excited to come back to the warm Melbourne spring weather. We're like 2 weeks away from summer, and it's currently blowing the strongest winds and raining. So cheers to the chaotic weather that seems to follow me around the globe. This year has been one of the most testing years I've had in a very long time. And I've had some testing years since moving to the other side of the world, okay? I've had some testing years, okay? There were so many times this year where I felt like my world was literally falling apart, and I know that sounds so dramatic, but it's just the reality. It was like having this overwhelming sense of a loss of control of everything around me. And I'm learning over the years that I like to feel in control of things. But everything just felt out of control, like within my body, my personal life, this lingering injury that I've been dealing with. It just all hit me so hard. And each month it just felt like I was trying to keep my head above water. And if you've ever felt that way in your life, you know how physically and mentally draining that can feel, day in and day out. And you just feel like a shell of yourself. That was me most of the year. Just keep swimming, just one foot in front of the other. Just get to the next hour of the day kind of mentality. Just keep showing up in some way. It just felt like I was clawing my way through the year. So if I had to pick the biggest lesson that I learned in 2024, it would be the power of showing up for yourself. In the past, like many humans, I've gone through things like grief, loss, betrayal. And in my 20s, I'm going to be honest, I didn't have the tools or the knowledge to cope with those things in healthy ways. Now, I didn't necessarily do anything too destructive, but I did neglect myself in a lot of ways. And I often look back at that time wishing that I knew better, but I also tried to give myself grace. I did the best that I could with what I knew and what I had. And that's all we're ever doing in any phase in our life. I'm really working on embodying that, giving myself grace for the things I didn't know and the things I didn't know how to cope with in a healthy way. Because I think that for a long time I carried a lot of guilt and shame around not coping with them the way that I probably would cope with them now. I just wish that I knew what I know now. I wish I knew what I was doing to my nervous system by allowing myself to spiral and not really taking steps to get back in control of my thoughts and just all the things that I've learned along the way that have hugely impacted my life in a positive way. I just wish I knew better. And like I said, I'm obviously still working through giving myself grace for not knowing. And it is hard. It is hard for me to not beat myself up for not handling things in a different way. But it's you did not know better. You didn't have examples of how to do that. So you can only do what you know. It's just a constant conversation I have to continue having with myself. So if you are currently in that same state where you are maybe beating yourself up over something that you wish you knew better, this is your reminder to take a deep breath. Give yourself grace and remind yourself that we are all doing the best with what we are currently equipped with, and that's all we can do. But I do remember when I was more in a phase of healing after those things in my 20s, where I had a conversation with myself and I said that if I ever went through something like that again, I wanted to make a promise to myself that I was going to handle it differently, that I was going to use the tools that I had started to learn then and implement them. And I wasn't going to let myself spiral, and I wasn't going to let it go as far as it did. I just said to myself, like, if anything rocked my world like that again, I promised myself that I would handle it better. And 2024 was the year that I was tested to keep that word to myself. I will also say, I didn't just go on and just go and live my life as normal. I was so intentional after all of that happened on my personal growth journey and my healing journey and processing trauma and all of those things. I was so intentional, and I became so open to accepting that information and wanting to work on myself and wanting to learn more and do better for myself. So it didn't just happen overnight. I really intentionally worked on myself so that if something did happen in the future, I was more equipped. So it was a very intentional choice. And 2024 ended up being the year that I was tested to keep my word to myself. But that's so much easier said than done, right? There were months of this year where getting out of the bed was a struggle. Eating a meal was a struggle. And if you watched my struggling vlog that I did a few months back, that was just a small glimpse of what I was going through in that time. Like, it definitely got worse before it got better. I wouldn't even say that I'm like over the hump of like the peak of it. I don't know. I am just rolling with the waves at this point. You know, it's November now, so I've made it this far. So I think I'm doing pretty good. But when I was in the thick of it this year, I really had to get so present with myself and present with my body and my emotions and tap into what my body needed in this moment. Where am I at right now? What, like processing, like really sitting with the emotions and the uncomfortableness and allowing myself to feel these negative human emotions that, you know, are part of the human experience and not suppressing them. Allowing myself to feel those things, accepting that I am feeling those things and this is where I'm at, but also working hard to figure out what I can do for myself in these moments to comfort myself, to show myself love and grace, and to support myself through these hard times. Which was so hard because in those moments, that's the last thing I wanted to do, was to like comfort and love on myself. That was the last thing I wanted to do. I wanted to hide under a rock and disappear from the world. I didn't want to love on myself and pour into myself. I did not want to do it. But I know, and I lived through what happens when I don't do that in these times of, I don't know, despair and grief and loss and all those things, you know, these hardships, I'll call them. I know what happens when I completely neglect myself through the hardships of life, and the pain and the consequences of me completely neglecting myself through the hardships is so unbearable for me to think about and so painful for me to think about going through again, because I completely lost myself. I never wanted that to happen to me again. It almost was the motivation for me to show up for myself through these hardships, even when that was the last thing I wanted to do. So I say that 2024 taught me the power of showing up for myself, but when I say that, I mean it more in like an emotional level. How to lean further into having my own back through hardships. You know, it's one thing to be able to show up for yourself when you're working towards a big, exciting goal. But what about showing up for yourself when it comes to areas like self-soothing, regulating your emotions, healthy coping mechanisms in the middle of the chaos of everything falling apart? That's when it gets real. That's when life is real. And so what that looked like for me, you know, when everything was falling apart around me, instead of digging myself into a hole and like just completely neglecting taking care of myself or anything, I became really intentional on what I wanted each day to look like. I knew I wanted to read and listen to things that made me feel good. So I was really intentional about that. I am a big fan of the Quote of the Day podcasts. They're short, they're sweet, you know, under 10 minutes. I can listen to them while I'm making a tea in the morning. Just fills my mind with good vibes, good mindsets. It's something so small, but it made such a difference in these moments. The smallest way for me to show up for myself, because you know when you're going through these hardships, the littlest thing feels like you are moving mountains. Getting out of the bed feels like you are moving mountains. Every little thing you are doing when you are in those dark moments in your life for yourself should be celebrated. Making the bed, celebrate that. Taking a shower, celebrate that. Eating a meal, celebrate that. It is when you are in those dark seasons, it's just you really need to give yourself so much grace, so much love. You are doing the best that you can, but we need to do something. We just can't fully give up on ourselves. We have to do something. Sometimes that something is taking a nap. It looks different, but that's why I think it's so important to check in with yourself. What do I need in this moment? How can I soothe my emotions right now? How can I bring a sense of comfort to myself right now? How can I do something that's going to make me feel better? I don't want anyone to think that this is me trying to say that you shouldn't feel those sad emotions. You shouldn't feel down, or it's not right to feel those things. It's okay to feel those things because they are part of the human experience. You know, there's a full range of emotions that we feel as humans, and they're not all happy. It's when those emotions, those negative, dark emotions are consuming you and they will eat you alive if you allow them to. It's when we need to take those little steps to show up for ourselves in the darkness that get us through to the light. So I just became so intentional on what I wanted this phase to look like. You know, I knew I wanted to feed myself with some hit of positivity. I didn't have the capacity to sit down and watch like an hour-long motivational whatever, or listen to an hour-long podcast or whatever, but those short and sweet snippets that I could listen to that really set my morning up for success were everything in that moment. You know what I mean? I knew I wanted to find ways to still show up online in some capacity, and that was very important to me because it gave me something to focus on, and I needed that. And I know I needed that because in the past, when I completely neglected everything, I had nothing but those negative emotions to focus on, and it sent me into spirals, and it just got worse. So it gave me something to focus on. Even when my creativity felt non-existent, I had something. And I just think that that is so important. I was so gentle with myself, gentle with how I moved my body, gentle with giving myself grace, gentle when it came to how I nourished my body. I poured heavily into my self-care routine. That's not to say I didn't cut back a lot on, my routines. I definitely did. I think the most important thing is knowing that I was in this survival state and not making it a problem that I had to take 90% of my things off of the plate. I had to make it so easy and so okay for me to only have one thing on my to-do list to tick off for that day, and it not making it a problem. And that wasn't easy as well, and I battled with that. But I tweaked my morning routine and my evening routine to fit what phase I was in that moment. I got myself a self-care journal that I used daily, and that was another thing for me to focus on. So I anchored into that, and it had like 3 gratitudes a day. And I'll tell you what, it was so hard for me to do that section of the journal, like finding those 3 gratitudes. Some days I only could find 2. Like, it was so hard in that phase, but I think that forcing yourself to look for things to be grateful for in that hardship is so hard, but so powerful. Finding it within myself to show up to do that in the morning was one of the best things that I did. And I'm so grateful for that mindset that I'm just so proud of myself for the way that I handled the hardships. And don't get me wrong, some days were better than others for sure. Some days my to-do list looked like making my bed, writing my gratitudes, eating at least one meal, getting out for fresh air for 5 minutes. And that was me like smashing my to-do list. Like, you are killing it today. You know what I mean? Like, eating one meal, killing it, making the bed, killing it. You are killing it at life today. Like, that's where we were at. That was a killing it day. And then I would have days where it's just like making the bed and eating a meal is killing it. It came in waves. I just let myself ride out those waves while just doing something each day. And I just let myself have those moments of processing those very delicate emotions during that time. And I say that on the other side of it now that we're at the end of the year, and it feels like a lot of those things are behind me. But I'm not in that survival state anymore. And that is like a breath of fresh air coming into the end of the year. But just learning how to show up and be a source of comfort and support for my own self, and not looking externally for someone else to do that, but looking within when it felt like that was the hardest thing for me to do. It was just so powerful. It was so important. It was so life giving, being able to show up for myself in that way, instead of sitting here and telling myself, well, you're not doing enough. You know, you only posted 2 videos this week. Well, you barely worked out this week. Or, well, you shouldn't have had that to eat. Or you're eating too much of this. Like, I could have easily spiraled into those mindsets and made myself feel even more like crap, when what I needed in those moments was love and comfort. And I needed to give it to myself before I allowed myself to accept that from anyone else. You know, because this isn't about like doing this on your own and this and that. Like, it is so great and important to have community and support, but not all of us have that. And I don't have a huge friend group here. I don't have many friends here in this phase that I'm currently in. I really wanted to be able to do that for myself, because I wasn't able to in the past, and I just wanted to show myself that I could. And I'm so grateful that I made that decision, because a lot of things in life are a choice. It's just been so empowering. This is life. There are going to be hardships. 2024 isn't the only year I'm going to have hardships like this, and I know that. If I'm able to lean on the things that I did this year to get myself through, it gives me hope that I can handle it. I can have my own back. I can ride the waves of the emotions of the human experience, you know? It just showed me how much I have grown as a person. Sometimes you can look back in life and it feels like you haven't changed a bit. Like, I sometimes still feel like I'm in my 20s. But when I think back to things like that and I compare how I handled things then to now, I'm a completely different person in the best way possible. It took going through some really hard things for me to be able to say that, but it's the work that I did in between that. It's the work that I'm doing in between the hardships that I feel is allowing me to show up to the hardships of life in a different way. Or just show up, not even hardships, it's allowing me to show up for myself in a different way on the good days and the bad. And I'm just so proud. I kept that promise to the 20-something version of myself. And I made it to the end of the year in one piece. And I am really proud of that. And that might seem like dramatic or like not a big deal to someone out there, but I'm ending the year and I still feel like me. I didn't completely lose myself through the chaos of life, and I have in the past. And I just feel so proud. I feel stronger. I feel more resilient. I've built new habits and routines that I know I can lean on through the challenges of life that I know are ahead. This life is not always easy, and there will always be challenges. And I just feel like I've put some new tools in my tool belt that are going to carry me through into the rest of my 30s, into my 40s and beyond. And that's just a really cool feeling. That was a lot, and I feel like a lot of emotions right now, but I hope that I can at least inspire someone to make some time in their life to think about all the ways that they showed up for themselves this year, because I'm sure that they are there. Even if you have to look a little harder for them, they are probably there. You have done amazing to get to this point, so I hope you're feeling proud of yourself. And the ways that you've showed up for yourself might not have been perfect or ideal, but I hope, like me, you can start embracing the lessons in the chaos, because that's just been something that has been a game changer in my life, just looking for the lessons. Being able to create a space where I can share the lessons that I'm learning in life, in a way, it creates a space for me to be able to look back on my growth as well over the years, which I think is really cool. I think it's really important to have those moments of reflection in our lives, and I think that the end of the year is such a great time to do that. I just truly do believe now that there is always a lesson for us to learn through our experiences in life if we are open to looking for the lessons. And I don't know, I just find a lot of comfort in that. But I would love to know what you are currently reflecting on this year, and what's one lesson that you are taking with you into the new year, because we're here to learn from each other. So let me know in the comments, don't be shy. And if you're new around here, consider subscribing for more content like this. I'm still figuring out what I'm doing around here, but I like sharing things that will motivate you, inspire you, sharing my life lessons and a little bit of my life abroad here. So come join the party. I am genuinely wishing you all the best for 2025. Stay safe out there, look after yourselves, show up for yourselves. Thanks for watching. I hope to see you tuning into another video soon. Bye.